afternoon. Welcome to our show. I'm your host, Melissa Ridgen. For the past 5 months, international headlines have been dominated by devastating and seemingly never-ending wildfires burning in Australia. At least 28 people have been killed and about 12.35 million acres have burned, according to the Associated Press. Then there's the billions of animals dead and the thousands of buildings destroyed. Today, we are putting Australia bushfires in focus. And what lessons should we be learning here from the fires that are burning there? We have a Dakota elder joining us to put this all in perspective and share his thoughts on how we need to move ahead and also talk about the dangers of continuing to not act. Later in the show, we'll be talking about Rogers' hometown hockey in Cree here on APTN, how it all came to be, and what to expect this year as we broadcast 6 more games. The Cree play-by-play master himself, Clarence Iron, will be joining me, and APTN's Danielle Adette to discuss all of that. Of course, we want you to join in our conversation. Our phone lines are open. You can call us toll-free at 1-877-647-2786. You can also tweet us at APTN InFocus. Before I introduce you to our guest, I'd like you to take a look at some of the devastation that we've seen here in Australia. It's been months that we've been, like I said, covering this. The number of animals killed, houses ravaged, people dead. One couple is contending with the destruction on their own farm. It's a gathering place that was used by Indigenous people in Australia for millennia. APTN's Lindsay Richardson spoke with them about what they're experiencing firsthand. Let's take a look.
But yeah, this is 3:30 in the afternoon.
The videos defy explanation, but in Australia, this is reality. On New Year's Eve, 40% of the Shoalhaven County was ablaze, shooting noxious flames high enough into Earth's atmosphere they were picked up by satellite images. By January 1st, news came that a strong wind, a southerly, was steadfastly approaching. Her husband Richard knew it would get bad.
Once these winds pick up, there is no way you can stop this fire. You could see the smoke coming over the mountain. I gave it about a week before it was going to hit our farm.
At home in Nowra, they prepared, donning gas masks, dousing the property with water to extinguish falling embers. But the flames were fierce as the fire approached the couple's 1,100-acre family property.
And even at night, if you're standing outside at night, you can just see the orange glow on the mountaintops in the distance.
In happier times, the Illaroo farm was home to a thriving ecology, the place where Richard's ancestors from Australia's Yuin Nation hunted, gathered, and performed ceremony, where Richard now imparts lessons about Indigenous culture and dance.
That land has taught me a lot. It was one of my greatest teachers.
For Candice Ojibwe from Kettle and Stony Point First Nation in Ontario, the farm taught lessons about the lay of the land down under.
And now I can identify tracks, I can identify the animals that are there, the different bird species, even when it comes to plants, trees, some of the bush medicines that Richard has taught me.
For the couple, the property is enshrined in memory.
There's nothing that can...
But Richard still struggles to describe the devastation in the charred exclusion zone that was once his nation's pride and joy.
This is the first time I've experienced something so bad, so out of control. From a green, lush bush and forest to just blackness, just burnt trees.
Not a leaf left on the trees.
By the first week of 2020, almost 90% of the county had burned. By the second week, however, the focus is shifting to rebuilding.
This used to be a house right here.
With family support, they're holding faith the farm will flourish again, once again opening its doors to youth curious about Indigenous culture, while waiting for more rain or an hourly flyover by a water bomber. Candice says she thinks of home, of the Canadians in the relief effort. The ones Richard thanks and welcomes now in his language.
Through the Mother, thank you for our law and culture and respect. May the 4 grandfathers from the 4 wind directions look over all of you and protect you, and thank you for your protection. There's a lot of healing there's a lot that needs to be done.
As smoke clears and fire turns to ember, the legacy of Iluru Farm ignites new hope for the Indigenous peoples who call the island home. Lindsay Richardson, APTN National News, Montreal.
Joining me now is Dakota Elder Wanbdi Wakita from Sioux Valley First Nation here in Manitoba. He's a spiritual leader and Sundance chief and also the grandfather in residence at the University of Manitoba. Mr. Wakita has shared many teachings about the state of our planet and what we've done and what we continue to do and the effects that our behavior will continue to have if we don't change. Thanks for joining us. What are your thoughts as you watch what's going on in Australia and hear the words of those people living through it?
The pictures that I see down there is happening all over the world for many, many years, thousands of years. It's not only just recent. Then that's what comes to my mind, the history and the stories that I've heard from my people.
You've said that this isn't new, this devastation, the devastation, the destruction, the fires. You said that there's been warnings for 1,000 years. Can you share a little bit about that with us?
Well, I think people have a general idea about a little bit of history, like the Ice Age, and something came out of that, and the floods, something came out of that. But there's more learning and more practicing, more understanding, more acceptance of real things that are going on. When we don't pay attention to that, of course, we have to be notified again of different kinds of things. And that started way back. People don't like it when their house burns down. People don't like it when they lose their houses in the floods, those kinds of things. I also hear people saying that it's too cold outside, or in the summer they say it's too hot. But so we need a good understanding of what went on from before, what needs to be done. Those are the things that I make prayers, Creator, ancestors, Mother Earth, Grandmother Earth. Those four mysteries, we rely on them. Grandmother Earth is deeper down, where she has the water and the oil and the diamonds and the gold. On the surface, on top, is Mother Earth, where she has the things we need to carry out our living. And I say we have to ask for forgiveness, because every day we make prayers and the answers that we get, we're not listening to those answers. We ask Creator for certain things. He shows us different things, but we don't do them. We kind of push them aside and continue to do the things that people think on their own, the things that they think is okay to go ahead and do that. And mostly it relates to things like money and land. In my talk, I always say the sun belongs to everybody. The water belongs to everybody. The wind belongs to everybody. The trees belong to everybody. So why not practice that? Why not learn about the natural world? There was a river going. It's going to go where it needs to go. We cannot intercept and change that flow of that water. It has to be a natural flow. And we don't know enough about that to intercept and put dams or bridges or diversions, things like that.
It's never stopped us from doing it.
Yeah, so those are the things that we have to pay closer attention to. You know, I got this tobacco from you, and I'm thinking, Creator is going to listen to our prayers, and Creator is going to answer our prayers again. And so when He answers, I'll share those answers with people. And hopefully we would learn about our own self, because that's where everything is going to start from inside here, our heart, our mind, our body, and our spirit. When we don't have those things working good, there's lots of trouble. We don't make good decisions. So those are the things that the old people, there's a reason why God gave us a heart, mind, body, and spirit. There's a reason why the old people tell us that make sure you know who you are. Make sure you form an attitude of some sort. And find out what kind of skills Creator gave you when you were born. And when you find out, put it into action. And then you have to have a belief of some sort in your living. Those are the things that the old people tell us. We're still trying to follow those as much as we can, with all the disruption and all the obstacles that are put in front of us.
We have a caller on the line right now who wants to join our conversation. Rick from Ontario.
Kiwi. It's such an honor to speak to our elders. If it wasn't for our elders, where would we be in today's world? Our elders are the ones that give us the freedom and our freedom of speech. But we need to stand together as one nation. Not as First Nation, but as one nation. And why can't we all get along as one nation instead of all of us fighting against each other?
Yeah, fighting against each other and fighting against ourselves. I like the point that you made.
Well, it's true. We all fight against each other, and the problem is, why can't we all work together as one team? Well, why do we have to spit and spat? Oh, you're not Indian, you're not red, you're not yellow. But you know, if we know where we come from, we are for who we are. Stand up for what we believe in. Why let people walk on top of us and let them get away with it? We need to stand for our own country. This is our land, not no white man's land, our land. And our land is taken from us people.
Thanks, Rick.
You're welcome. Miigwech.
What are your thoughts when you hear there is that demand? It's like people, I hear it all the time, we're in this position that the world is in because of, progress, capitalism, all the other things that people say. Oftentimes the same people who are critical of all of the things that have happened to this world, we also use all of those things happily. We like the conveniences of life that these things have provided us.
Yeah.
But we want our land back because we can fix it. What are your thoughts?
That's because Santa came into the picture. That was actually one of my recommendations, to learn enough so that we're able to do things together, because that's what it's going to take. All people. That's what it needs to take. They got to get together. They got to develop some things that's going to be good. It used to be like that. Even in my younger days, I remember the old people, they gathered together and they identify an issue or a concern. And all of them would decide, yeah, this is an issue, this is the issue, and this is one of the concerns. And then they get together to decide how are they going to address this issue. and they all have a hand in that. And once they come to an agreement, they decide on the logistics, like who's going to do it, how long it's going to take. And when they do make a decision, though, it's always for the good of the community. We lost that because somebody over there says, you follow me or you do what I tell you. That's, those are no longer valid because it's not working. And how long would it take for us to learn that the way things are going now is not working? How long is it going to take?
Well, we want to get into that when we come back from the break, because I don't think we have much time to learn it. But we do have to take another break. I'll ask you to hold your thoughts on that for when we come back. When we come back, we're going to hear from somebody who knows about traditional forest management, ignored for decades by those pushing Western forest management techniques that are now being embraced. And there's a desire to go back to the traditions. Dakota Elder here is going to stay with us too. We've got lots more to talk about after the break, so stay with us.
Join our conversation now. Call in toll-free at 1-877-647-2786. Like us on Facebook on our APTN News page. Follow or tweet us at APTN InFocus. And send your thoughts to infocus@aptn.ca.
Welcome back. Today we're discussing wildfires and forest management. Jeff Eustache is the Department Manager of the Forest Fuel Management for the First Nations Emergency Services Society in British Columbia. The Fuel Management Department works with First Nations and provincial and federal governments and Indigenous Services Canada to assist and deliver wildfire prevention programs. The threat of fire is always a concern, of course, in many communities, British Columbia especially, with no lack of fuel, like trees, obviously, to feed wildfires. So earlier this week, I caught up with Mr. Eustache to discuss his work in his department, what they've been doing, what they're doing, and what they hope Canada will do, and what they hope the rest of us will learn from the fires in Australia. First Nations Emergency Services Society.
We're a non-profit society in the province of BC, and we work under a First Nations Board of Directors, and we work with the provincial and federal governments to serve the First Nations communities in BC, primarily in wildfire prevention, structural fire services, and we do some emergency management.
What were your thoughts as this devastation unfolded in Australia?
Well, I think it hit home for BC as we've gone through that type of impacts, maybe not quite as to that extent over the last, since 2003 basically, and the last few years have been a little bit more significant than previous years. So BC is, we face some huge devastation due to wildfires as well, so we understand what they're going through.
Of course. Can you tell us, what does your department, Forest Fuel Management, what do you guys do?
Well, we work with the province of BC through the BC Wildfire Service and the Union and BC municipalities, and we co-deliver a wildfire prevention program for the citizens of British Columbia. First Nations, local governments, and regional districts can apply to us to secure funding for community wildfire protection planning that identifies risk and threat due to communities, around the communities and out to a couple of kilometers, primarily within what we call the wildland-urban interface. That planning helps develop prescriptions and guides of how they'd like to reduce that threat and risk, primarily through doing fuel treatments, thinning, spacing, understory, clean up to reduce the density of the forest and remove any dead and decaying material, and then they can dispose of that through pile and burn or other means.
Is there can you explain the difference between, traditional forest management practices and the Western ways of managing a forest? From your perspective, what's the major difference?
Well, historically, our First Nations communities would go out and conduct prescribed burning every season to help reduce the stand composition, the thickness, and open it up for other purposes such as wildlife, vegetation management, and other uses of the forest from an Indigenous perspective. So it was more, and of course there was no mechanical type equipment in those days, so it was all primarily done through hand or prescribed burning, basically to open the stand up and maintain the stand composition that would benefit wildlife and other First Nations uses such as gathering for berries and those types of and plants.
Are we going back? Do you find is there a willingness to go back to how forests were managed prior to contact and using some of those management practices here in Canada now to combat forest fire risk?
There is a strong interest from the province and others across Canada and actually North America to go back to traditional burning practices. And there's some high recommendations and some actions to go back to utilizing Indigenous knowledge around the incorporate burning practices. So there is a definite interest by the province and the First Nations communities to try and get back to utilizing prescribed burning as a management tool. Prescribed burning is a very important management tool, but it has to be utilized under a fairly planned and structured process just due to the changes the forest has gone through in the last 100 years. There's significant changes in the stand composition, and now it's very thick and dense, and there's some forest health issues out there. So it has to be done in a very planned, proper way. I think the days of going out and lighting a match in the forest are gone because of the changes in the forest.
That's fascinating. Well, I thank you for taking time out to share this with us. It's certainly an important discussion if we're to be looking at ways to avoid being in a position that Australia is in right now. Thanks so much, Jeff. I'm joined here in studio still by Dakota Elder Wanbdi Wakita. I'm curious your thoughts as you watched that interview with Mr. Eustache about the, getting back to how forests were managed.
Yeah, it brings back a lot of memories because I remember us having a group of people from Environment Canada going over to Nairobi to the UN meetings to tell about Indigenous things. What can we do so there was a lot of information being shared. And that's what I've noticed, that, there's, I think a lot of people know a lot of things that need to be done. But for some reason, they're not doing it. Even when they have enough information, they're not willing to.
What should we be doing, and why aren't we hearing from these people who know what should be done?
It's something to do with money. It's something to do with wanting to get elected every 4 years. It's not, for some reason, not being able to work together and not listening. And when we make decisions, they think that only this group or this is the best decision we're going to make, and it's going to be for this purpose. The way we do things is holistic way, to do things in a holistic way. And we could see that real clearly. The water, the bugs, the animals, the wind, everything is connected. They work together. We have a saying in our living, or in our culture, mitakwe oas, all my relations, and that means man, animals, wind, and medicines, the 4 things Creator put on this earth originally. And they told us that these are your relatives. to live together. So that would be a way to do things together. And just like that caller said, that all of us have information that we're able to make a contribution to doing something, but it has to be good for the community, the whole of the, like Canada, for instance. That way people will be able to, whatever decision is made, people will be able to benefit from those kinds of things.
Do you think that too many of us have embraced this Western way of living and we've lost touch with where we came from? And how do we get it back?
There is something called a sacred spirit, and the old people told us you got to have the will to do something. You have to have one. Individual have to have that. Mm-hmm. So when these groups they need to come together to talk together and make decisions together. That way we begin to realize that there's not only just that one way. I'm sensing that almost every thing that people need is going to be a policy or a law, and these people can do things good. You just need to support them. If we can have a look at things like that, and we have to be flexible enough in each of the regions to be able to accommodate some kind of change or some kind of development. It can't be one policy across Canada. It can no longer be like that. It has to change.
That's a good point. I want to take another look at another story that we have from Australia. We have here, this is from our friends at the National Indigenous Television in Australia, where firefighters and residents are calling for a royal commission into this national bushfire crisis, saying that there needs to be better preventative measures when similar disasters occur. Let's take a look.
Visitors to the historic New South Wales coastal town of Mogo previously described it as a beautiful part of the world.
Half of Mogo is missing, and there's complete devastation down here. I've never seen anything quite like it.
In its place stands the remains of a quiet community. What once was the Mogo Local Aboriginal Land Council building is now reduced to rubble. Homes, buildings and sacred land has been lost, as well as the history kept within them.
There's a whole heap of documents that's been destroyed and lost that needs to be reconstructed and reconstructed carefully so that we can make claims to get this community back on its feet again.
With around 350 residents, the recovery efforts have begun in Mogo, but the emotions are overwhelming.
We're strong and we're not going nowhere, and to me the support that's rolling in from other towns and even as far away as Queensland is just unbelievable, and it almost brings tears to my eyes.
The professionals on the front lines of the battle have had enough. They're calling for a royal commission into the bushfires. It would focus on firefighting resources, communication protocols, funding and environmental factors.
We need to properly examine all facets of what has occurred this summer. Why has this season been different to the past? We need to have confidence in a body that could be set up to do such work. Only a royal commission will give us that.
The Prime Minister visited the fire-ravaged community of Kangaroo Island today. He previously said he would consider a royal commission once the situation subsides. That still may take some time. The temperature is again set to rise to extreme levels in areas of the country on Friday. Shani Wellington, NITV News.
We have another caller on the line, Dolphus from Alberta. Thanks for calling.
Hello.
Do you have something you'd like to share or a question you have for our guest?
Yeah, I'm so I'm so fortunate to be listening to your program right now, and the elder that's sitting in front of you, with you, that's talking about the aspects of what's happening with the land. He's thoroughly true. Like what he said is, you speak from the heart and the mind. That is more needed to be spoken out to people, to the general public, because today's youth is very in turmoil because they don't know which way to turn and they don't know which way to lead their life because of our suicide rates that they're talking about all the time on news. And it's very important that we practice our traditions, what our ancestors have left us behind.
Yeah, thanks for that, Dolphus. Mr. Wakita, what is we're running out of time a little bit here for this segment. What's your call to action for everybody who's watching or who can share what they hear today with their loved ones, their community?
You know, I'm almost 80 years old, and I'm just beginning to find out about Creator and the ancestors and the kind of sacred instructions that they give us each and every day. And our job is to make sure that we understand what kind of instructions is given to us and what do we need to do, when will we do that. And so, you know, I said earlier that we live by our culture, which says all my relations, mitaku awas. So there's a bunch of ancestors, some people call them angels, tukashiras, whatever their names are, they're waiting for us to call them. And do we look up and call them? Do we do cleansing with medicine? Do we believe that this is what needs to be done? So there's a number of things that is called the mystery, and it belongs to everybody. It's not only us. It belongs to everybody, and we need to start doing things together.
Thank you.
It's pretty important.
Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to come share this with our audience. Really appreciate this.
Yeah, thank you.
We have to take another break, but when we come back, we've got Rogers Hometown Hockey in Cree. It's back for another 6 games here on APTN. We've got the Cree play-by-play master, Clarence Iron. He's coming up. And joining us, too, is APTN's Danielle Audette. She's going to share some behind-the-scenes details about how this history came to be. Stay tuned. Welcome back. It was an NHL game like you've never seen before. For the first time, a game was broadcast live on national TV in Plains Cree. APTN and Sportsnet teamed up for the matchup between the Montreal Canadiens and the Carolina Hurricanes for a game last season. Let's take a look back at a story from APTN's Dennis Ward.
3, with the Association of National One, and go blue.
This was the start of a milestone moment in Canadian television history. Sportsnet and APTN teaming up to deliver the first ever NHL game broadcast live on TV in Plains Cree. For play-by-play announcer Clarence Iron, it was a lifelong dream fulfilled.
It happened. My dream came true. But to call it in Cree, I never thought. I thought I'd do it in English because I called a lot of English hockey games before. But to do the Cree, you know, even myself sometimes I amaze myself.
Iron has long been recognized as one of the Cree voices of hockey, but he hopes this historic moment opens the doors for the next generation too. So does studio host Earl Wood, who was beaming with excitement throughout the game between the Montreal Canadiens and the Carolina Hurricanes.
I want to invite all those young people out there, no matter where you are, to take it upon yourself to gain an interest in our language and to utilize it. It has a place in this modern day society and can take you anywhere you want to go. Anywhere you want to go, your language will take you there.
The game was pure entertainment on and off the ice, with the Hurricanes playing spoilers for Canadiens fans in a 2-1 overtime win in a game with playoff implications. Even if you didn't understand a word, you could feel the excitement in the call. Sportsnet's executive producer of special events was on hand for the groundbreaking partnership.
That was exciting tonight. It really was, and to see some of the tweets that were being put out on social media was pretty exciting. And to hear you guys call it the way you did, it was entertaining and really fun to listen to.
While some may have tuned in initially for the novelty, many stuck around because it was so exciting to watch. An important game for Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples, says Jason Chamakis.
The only thing that I can think of right now is wow. To be part of something that amazing, to have our languages broadcast into living rooms all across Canada, and to have people who don't understand the language hear how beautiful our Cree language sounds. It's amazing to be a part of.
Chamakis hopes the airing of this game is about more than just hockey.
I think we want everybody to get along and to care about one another, because I see a disconnect. And through something like this, our hope is that we build these bridges between people. That's what I'm hoping for, that this will lead to something good, something positive. Miuit taskito, and we say in Cree, which is sharing the land together in a good way.
Studio analyst and former NHLer John Chabot says this can't just be a one-off.
The NHL has done a great job in reaching out to our new Canadians, but they've never really reached out to our pre-Canadians. And this is something that was a long time coming.
And it may not be a one-off. Talks are underway in the hopes of airing more games next season on APTN in different Indigenous languages.
I love that comment about pre-Canadians. Yesterday we had the chance to talk with Danielle Odette, who has been with APTN's programming department for over a decade, bringing us some of our favorite shows. She was there every step of the way to make this Rogers Hometown Hockey in Cree on APTN a reality. And the play-by-play voice that we just can't get enough of, Clarence Iron. Here's what they had to say when we talked yesterday. So lots of people, of course, were thrilled when APTN broadcast Rogers Hometown Hockey in Cree last year, first time ever, big historical moment. But I don't know that necessarily everybody knows the background of how that all came to be. So we've got Danielle Odette here joining us to discuss from APTN's perspective, and also, of course, Clarence Iron. We could not have a conversation about Cree, hockey in Cree without Clarence Iron. He's joining us by phone. I want to talk to you both. We'll start with you, Danielle. How did NHL ever, whose pipe dream was this?
Okay, so from my understanding, ever since APTN had covered the Olympics in 2010 in the various Indigenous languages, we had opened up a conversation with Sportsnet on the possibility of exploring covering NHL production games in an Indigenous language. And we kept going back and forth. And then what happened was there was a little bit of a movement, a demand out of Alberta by a small community that brought Sportsnet to their community to talk about the idea of producing the game in Cree. And they gave them examples of how they would cover the game in the Indigenous language. And from that meeting, from what I understood, the Sportsnet representative flew to Toronto, called APTN immediately and said, do you guys think you would be willing to explore a partnership and deliver a game in an Indigenous language in March of 2019?
And did you know it was going to be in Cree?
We didn't know at the time that it was going to be in Cree. We actually took a moment to step back and do some research on what Indigenous language that we could explore and consider, and collected some data to confirm what was the largest group of Indigenous speakers in Canada that we could explore and consider, and factoring in like our ability to bring the talent to the table, right? So through that research, a decision was made to go with Plains Cree, and that's when we made a call asking members from Plains Cree communities to come forward and submit an audition where we can hear and see their ability to present an NHL game to our viewers. So
and then I'm assuming, Clarence, did you submit a recording of what you would bring to the table in announcing a game in Plains Cree?
Yeah, well, at first I it didn't dawn on me I'd be chosen there. I had seen the advertising.
Of course it'd be Clarence.
Yeah, well, not at that time. I'd seen the advertising.
You're too humble.
My friends were talking to me through Facebook, get it, do it, Clarence, go it. So finally I said, okay. So I did send a little demo through here. I did just an original play-by-play without any action in it, but I did find a few old some of the games that I used to call. So I did put in a few of them excerpts.
I would love to hear one, but this might seem strange to some of our viewers because these are in English, right?
Right. See, I did these in English. I did call some games in Prince Albert, Meadow Lake, Saskatchewan, as far as Prince George, British Columbia.
Wow.
I did some games in English, but I'd throw in the odd Cree for at least a minute or two, and that I do have a few of them, but this one is in English. That is when a team had scored. This is back in late 90s. So here's one of them.
Okay.
There's Watson ready, he scores. Number 4 Rome was right on the doorstep. All the work by Rome, and that is a good goal.
So that was one of them.
So did you, when your friends convinced you to apply to call these games in Cree, give us a little bit of background first of all. How long have you been calling hockey games in English?
Oh, I'd say, I semi-retired here for a good 10 years or so. I've been working out in the oil field industry, the oil and gas industry, and also in mining in northern Saskatchewan. So I left radio for a bit, but during that time I was with MBC Radio out of La Ronge. We did have the opportunity to call some hockey tournaments, and we did start with one in Prince Albert, and that's why I just recently wanted to thank Knapp Gardner, was the CEO of Mississippi Broadcasting Corporation. He gave me that opportunity, so that's where he opened the door for me, and that's where people heard me do the English version plus a little bit of that Cree, and that's how I ended up over here.
Well, and we're all thankful for that. Danielle, you would have gone through these submissions, and was it pretty obvious where we were going?
It was very obvious. I have to say that the engagement we saw via social media on members of various communities sort of nudging each other to kind of like encourage others to submit that. And then certain members of the communities would tag people from the posting that we had released, and so we were able to do a little bit of investigating on our own while we were waiting for these submissions to come through. And when we got those submissions and we presented them to Rogers to get their approval, essentially, because this is an iconic brand it's symbolic for all Canadians. And when they heard and saw what we had narrowed down in terms of submissions, they were like, hands down, that's the team. We don't need to hear anybody else. We don't need to see anybody else. Earl, Jason, John, and Clarence, with the energy that Clarence brings, as you can hear, there's no doubt that was it. And the rest is history, and here we are.
Here we are. So after, I want to ask both of you. Clarence, I'll start with you. So after the game last year that you called, it was the Carolina Hurricanes and the Montreal Canadiens. Did you think that was it? It was just over and done with?
Well, yeah, I thought, well, that's it. But we did mention maybe something could be done because the feedback that we had, there was some people across Canada, you could pretty much see them on Facebook, wanting more, and it seemed like people were hungry to hear the Cree play-by-play in that hockey. So I thought maybe it's possible. But, I thought, well, that's it. I was happy with it.
Danielle, people went bananas. And this is not only people who watch the game and understand Cree. People just went bananas for Cree in hockey, watching an NHL game.
It was, we were hoping to see some engagement with our viewers. And we were blown away with the fact that we were seeing Rogers Hometown Hockey and Cree on APTN trending via all social media platforms. The night of the game, how viewers were engaging with us and amongst other communities to point to the fact that this was a historical milestone in the making. That night was such an eventful night, I think, for everybody involved. I don't want to speak for the talent, but for APTN, having had the privilege to deliver something of that caliber to our viewers and to represent our communities with the amazing Indigenous Cree speakers that came to the forefront was phenomenal. Now, post-game, how and what we saw, that interaction continue was unexpected, and with that we were able to sort of nudge Rogers, Sportsnet, and be like, we got quite a bit here, so can we continue that conversation? And they were very willing to continue that conversation, and now here we are in 2020, covering 6 games this season, and looking forward to the next 2 seasons with Sportsnet.
Well, thank you for all the work that you did in making this happen. Clarence, I think I speak for everybody watching when I say we are so thankful that we're going to have you back. We love listening to you call these games, and we have another 6 games this season, or, well, not another, 6 games this season, and we can't wait. What are you most excited about this season, Clarence?
Well, I'm excited to call the play-by-play. It's a dream come true. I did at one time in the back of my mind, like I said before, I would have loved to call play-by-play hockey in the NHL, and now it's coming to pass. But in my prime, when I was a little younger, I thought I would have done it, following even my team was the Maple Leafs and also the Edmonton Oilers. So one of those teams I would have loved to have followed.
Well, there's always next season, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, well, but it seems like Winnipeg Jets all the way.
Yes, yes. Well, thank you so much for taking time to join us today, Clarence, and to share this excitement with us. And Danielle, thank you for coming in and filling us all in on some of the background as to how this all happened. And we look forward to 6 games this season for Rogers Sportsnet Hockey in Cree here on APTN.
Thank you.
Those 6 Rogers Hometown Hockey in Cree games on APTN will air right here starting this Sunday, January 19th. That's a matchup between the Winnipeg Jets and the Chicago Blackhawks beginning at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. The other 5 games are February 9th, February 23rd, and March 1st, March 15th, and March 29th. For more information, you can check out our hockey webpage at aptn.ca/hockey. It has all of the information that you need so you don't miss any of those games. Before we go, we didn't have a whole lot of time to do social media today. I just wanted to share a comment I thought was interesting from our social media feed, our live Facebook feed actually, about forest fires. This is from Joanne. We've always heard growing up that fire is like death. So many losses, so much trauma, so sad for those losses, the wildfires, the homes. That's all the time that we're going to have for today, talking about forest fires in Australia, what we can do here to not be in the same position, and of course talking about Cree hockey. So happy we've got another 6 games of that. Thank you all, of course, for tuning in. We love our guests who tune in each week. This episode will be available for a download as a podcast on our website, aptnnews.ca/podcast. I'm Melissa Ridgen. Have a great afternoon. I'll see you back here next week.